Joining me now from our Perth studio is the Executive Director of GT Communications and a columnist for the Australian and Western Australian, Gemma Tognini. Gemma, welcome. And rocking
Great to be with you, Catherine.
frames.
It's a byproduct of my advancing years, Catherine, but thank you.
Well, talking about advancing years, I've got to do an eye test to retain my driver's licence, so I'm not having any money on whether I'm driving in 2 weeks' time. Anyway, to business. You wrote a powerful column in the West Australian today, just talking about risk aversion and the safety first attitude that's become pervasive amongst our policymakers. Now, while not specifically addressing the budget, it did highlight one important factor upon which many of the budget assumptions are resting, and namely, that is that we will not be seeing too many dramatic, sharp lockdowns moving forward and that borders will largely remain open. Take us through what your sense of whether we're ever going... I hated the term COVID normal. Do you ever see us going back to an Australia where we travel with a relative degree of freedom again without masks and so on and so forth? Like, it seems to me a distant vision at the moment.
I think we need to fight for it, and let me unpack that a little bit. But to your earlier comments about my column and the politics of this week and the budget, and I want to preface all of that by saying I am such a fan of the Morrison government and Josh Frydenberg in terms of their economic management of COVID. But when I was sitting down to watch the budget speech on Tuesday night, and it was impossible to ignore the language, Catherine. We are going to keep you safe. This is about keeping Australia's economy safe, keeping you safe. And as you say, the assumptions that a lot of these budget forecasts have been made on are around closed borders, closed international borders primarily. And like I alluded to in my column in today's West, this is a political decision. Prime Minister Morrison is not a fool. He's read the room. This week, I think he was dancing with a little bit of fire under his feet, because on the one hand, there was the weekend story about borders, international borders being closed indefinitely. And then he tried to roll that back saying, no, I'm not pursuing an elimination strategy. Well, mate, pick a horse and ride it, because it certainly seems as if that's the case. And, you know, like I said in my column today, politically, I understand what he's doing because he's read the room. He's seen the results in Queensland and Western Australia. And I just think that leadership is about doing what's right over what's popular. And leadership is putting purpose over preference. And I understand, probably a reason, Catherine, why you'll never find me in federal or state politics, any kind of politics, because I'm not interested in any kind of game playing. I think there are many people, myself included, and I've made no secret of this, I haven't seen my family in Italy in 2 years, and many of us, because Australia is a multicultural society, many of us have family, not just family of other ethnicities, but, you know, family who live overseas, Australian citizens who live overseas. And this is a fundamental right. And never has the concept of safety been so politicised, and we're surrendering the things that make a life worth living, moments with loved ones, you know, grandparents with grandchildren, you name it, the list is extensive. This has got to be an election year, if not this year, then early next. The Prime Minister has read the room. I, for one, felt it was a bit of a kick in the guts. Cousins of mine, actually, Catherine, in the United States, and nobody looks at the United States as any sort of... well, mind you, their vaccination program is significantly better than ours, but I've got cousins in the States who are, you know, registered Democrats, very, very committed Democrat voters, and even they cannot believe the level of restriction that's been imposed on Australian citizens. We can't leave our country. And at the drop of a hat, any of the state premiers can say, you're not leaving the state without permission. And I just think that is such a damning indictment on who we are as a nation. I feel like if you look at Premier Berejiklian and the way she has led, from her language, Catherine, to, you know, from word to deed, if you like. I remember very well, I think it was around mid last year, and media was asking her, when are we going to lock down again? Are you going to lock down? And she was very clear and said, there will be no more widespread spread blanket lockdowns in New South Wales. This is the policy we're going to pursue. We're going to keep the economy open. And once she'd sort of drawn that line in the sand, it became a bit of a non-event with occasional pockets of pressure. But look at the results there. Look at the results there. And I believe, it's very difficult to wind back. How does the Prime Minister politically step out a road back to, I can get on a plane anytime I want. I can go and exercise my democratic right to see my family in another country anytime I want. We are, and for some people, this isn't a sense of being in jail. For some people, this is, oh my God, thank God I'm wrapped up in a doona and I'm safe. Well, that's lowest common denominator politics in my view, and it's striking at the lowest common denominator. And the rest of us who have lives to live and understand that all we have is time are feeling the pinch. And the other thing I might add, and I was seeing this online just before we came on air, Catherine, is who would come to work in Australia knowing that you're going to be restricted? Who would say, I'm going to leave, the States, wherever, Asia, Europe, and I'm going to come to Australia knowing that if I should choose to leave Australia, I might not get back in, and all of the complications around that. I think it's very difficult politically, not just practically. The Prime Minister owes us all a clear roadmap, and I hate the term, as you said, COVID normal. I despise it. I loathe it. Back to normal. I don't. COVID normal's not a thing. I want to know how he's going to step us back to the fact that Gemma, Catherine, whoever can get online, book a flight to wherever, grab my passport, go and come back.
Well, look, just rounding it out, what did you make of the week on balance, in the sense that I thought Anthony Albanese's response smacked very much of really just trying to mobilise his base, whereas I thought the Treasurer did really look like an incumbent. I know it's tough for Labor when you're being outspent by a government that was elected having called Labor economically responsible. We're now dealing with an eye-watering amount of intergenerational debt. So it doesn't leave Labor much in its conventional playbook. What's your sense of the electoral politics, and will he go to the polls before the end of the year?
I think if the Prime Minister doesn't go this year, it'll be early next year. And look, I'm guessing on that, and I'm basing that on his language, on the budget, on his stance on borders, all of those things. As for Mr Albanese, I do feel for him. It's a budget reply speeches are almost a non-event, aren't they? Nobody really pays attention to them because they're never going to happen. But for Mr Albanese, my take is that the budget reply speech is the least of his worries. Like, he's electorally irrelevant. Labor are somewhat electorally irrelevant on many fronts. I think primarily, I was noting Tony Blair's comments about the ruination of Labor in the UK because of the left and the far left rather, and let's call them the woke brigade for want of a better phrase. But that to a lesser degree is Labor's problem in Australia. You have this, they're in bed with the Greens, they're in bed with the unions, they don't know what they stand for, they've lost Middle Australia. The least of Mr Albanese's problems is the budget reply speech. He doesn't stand for anything, and he's certainly not got a great deal of gravitas or leadership, on his shoulders.
Be interesting to see the next set of numbers in Newspoll, Gemma. Thank you for allocating some time to us tonight from the Golden West.
Oh, it's my
Love
pleasure.
to your mum, and also to Buster Tognini. We have to have a dog session on this program.
He's Australia's first dog, Catherine. Thanks for having us.
Bless you. Have a great weekend.